Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Friday Morning Live. I want to make sure we are not in our normal studio this morning, so if you would just put something in the question pane that you could hear us loud and clear. I'm here with Kyle. That's Dave Newell. Yes. Kyle, how about you?
Good morning, everybody.
All right, good. Everybody's popping in. Hey, welcome to 2025. Kyle and I were just talking. The semifinal game started out a little lackadaisical.
Yeah, for those of us who don't have a rooting interest, yeah. It was a little boring to begin with.
Boy, it turned out, unfortunately for our incoming chair, Chris Heydrich, it didn't turn out his way. But we'll see what happens tonight with Ohio State and Texas.
Yeah, so I guess we'll see whether Dave Burt joins us next week. If it goes the wrong way for Ohio State, I think we might have somebody else in mourning for a little bit.
So, again, welcome. It's January 10th, 2025, and we're excited to kick off a new season of Friday Morning Live with our special guest. We always kick off the new year with Kyle. There's yours truly, Dave Newell. There is Kyle, President and CEO of FAIA. So, again, thank you for joining us this morning. Again, just a reminder, most of you have already found the question pane. So if you have a question, please, we'll get to as many as we can throughout the broadcast. But if they require some due diligence offline, we'll get back with you. So, but certainly pose your questions as we go through the presentation this morning. So to kick us off, as we start 2025 and ended 2024 in a positive note, we had a lot of market stabilization, so to speak. We had some new entrants. We had some things happening, certainly with citizens and depopulation. So, one of the things that we get a lot of questions about is, what is the state of the property market? How we see it and how you see it, and some of the conversations you're having, Kyle.
Yeah. So thanks, Dave, and Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning. So I always, and many folks on this call have probably heard me repeat this before, I always feel a little silly, telling our members or giving our members, an update on the state of the property market when they're the ones every day, selling policies and dealing with carriers and their customers. But I do think we kind of have maybe a little more global or holistic look at the market. And obviously with our involvement, both from a regulatory and legislative standpoint, there are inevitably some things that hopefully we can share that are just helpful to our members, maybe just from a slightly broader perspective. And I don't think that you can, have a conversation about the state of the market without talking about litigation. For years, there has been an effort by the legislature to, address volatility in Florida's property market and specifically homeowners. When we say property, we need to sort of be a little more specific and talk about the homeowners property market. But there have been efforts to try to solve some of the volatility issues. And, there's a lot of nibbling around the edges, a lot of things done with assignment of benefits and other things. But the legislature never really got to what I always believed was the underlying root cause of the problem. And that was, sort of the system or loophole that had been set up in Florida law that was a one-way attorney fee that incentivized third parties to be involved in the claims process. It was never meant to work that way. While I certainly understand and appreciate the legislature's, use of the one-way attorney fee and desire to try to level the playing field for policyholders against insurers if there's a dispute, it was being used in a way that it was never intended. And so, in 2022 and in 2023, really the legislature was faced with, not having really many other options, but to do something that I wasn't sure they would ever do. and that was doing away with the one-way attorney fee statute. And for many of us who have worked in the industry, especially on the advocacy side for as long as I have, I got to admit, I don't think I really believed that it was possible that the Florida legislature would repeal the one-way attorney fee statute, but they did. And so, are we having technical difficulties?
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. But they did, and then the celebration can only last so long, because then you can't help but worry. Okay, we've been talking about the need for one-way attorney fee reform for the entirety of my 20-year career at FAIA. Boy, I sure hope the outcome is what everybody said it was going to be.
Right.
And thus far, it has. It has done exactly what most folks in the industry said that it would. In fact, just recently, the commissioner released some data that is actually not contained in my blog. I posted a blog in December that was just sort of a state of the state recap of the property market, homeowners market, and where we've been, and where we're going, where we are now. But just recently, I think maybe a day or two ago, the commissioner posted an infographic that was showing the notices to the DFS Service of Process website, which is what notifies how many lawsuits that have been filed. And that data is great. I mean, it's really incredible. So in 2024, there was just north of 50,000 of those notices that were provided to the Service of Process. Now, at 50,000 isn't good.
Right.
by any measure, still makes us an outlier across the country for number of property lawsuits. On the other hand, you have to look at it in context. And so, the reason it's good is that, it's the first time, or it's the lowest number since 2018. So in the last 6 years, we've finally seen that sort of curve come the other direction.
Right.
And it's the lowest number since 2018. And it was a 23% decrease year over year. So from 23 to 24, the number of lawsuits or notices that were filed with the Service of Process website or division at DFS went down. So that's positive. And so that's sort of the underlying, issue that many of us believed had to be addressed for there ever to be, any sort of predictability or stability in a market that has been plagued for years with volatility.
Right. And again, if you hadn't seen Kyle's blog, it's certainly on the website. I would encourage you to go back and read it. As Kyle mentioned, the commissioner always does some year-end stuff that are starting to percolate out. The OIR has those on the website, so certainly take a look at those as those items come forward, and certainly we'll talk about them some. But one of the things, again, as Kyle mentioned, is carrier developments. There are things that are happening in Florida, new entrants. We have seen some of our property markets on FMS certainly begin to write voluntary business again, open up zip codes, open up territories. Depopulation has been certainly something that's been talked about and had a lot of good results out of Citizens this past year. Reinsurance is always a constant conversation, Kyle, as people look to see what rates are going to do and how that reinsurance market is going to be impacted. Yeah. And then Citizens. We can't have any of these conversations without talking about Citizens and how that relationship is with us, with FAI, and certainly with our members.
Yeah.
So let's talk about maybe some ideas about new entrants.
I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball, and everybody here that's on the call, and just sort of maybe take this in a slightly different order.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about reinsurance first, mainly because as I started with litigation, that's sort of the underlying issue that has plagued the market. Sort of the next layer, I would say, that globally impacts the Florida market is reinsurance.
Yep.
And so let's sort of build
Absolutely.
on it. And so, the reinsurance market is something that Florida relies very heavily on. Without the reinsurance market, this doesn't exist. The Florida property market doesn't exist. especially now the way that it is structured primarily through domestic insurers. And so, as litigation was, increasing at rates that nobody thought was possible, that in turn ended up being losses to reinsurers that were never modeled for.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
modeling has made, great strides, and reinsurance data and promulgation of rates and so forth has made incredibly good strides here in recent years. And, most in that space feel pretty comfortable with their ability to predict losses.
Yeah. Yeah.
What they can't predict is the litigation costs on top of that.
Yeah, all that tail that comes along with that.
That's exactly right. So, I've used this example before, but I think it's an apt one. The former commissioner testified in a committee at one point. I thought it was really interesting the way he described it. Talking about Hurricane Irma. Hurricane Irma losses were really, really close to what reinsurers modeled them to be.
Right.
However, if you then took that out 2 years following Hurricane Irma, it was as though that hurricane made landfall 3 times.
Wow.
With the litigation that ensued after the storm and additional losses that were felt by both the primary carriers here in Florida and the reinsurers. So that's what they could not, price for it. Couldn't predict it. And so, it led to a constriction of capital, constriction of capacity. It's a pretty simple, law of supply and demand. It's a global market where capital is looking for a certain return, and they're balancing that against the risk associated with it. And when capital starts to not feel comfortable with the risk that they're taking on, people are going to pull back, and prices then are going to go up for those that are left in the market. So obviously there were some really significant increases in reinsurance costs that is a straight pass-through.
Exactly.
I mean, that is, the carriers make their annual rate filings. They may make other rate filings throughout the year to adjust. But then they have a dedicated reinsurance rate filing that they give to the office that just basically shows the office, here's what our treaties say, here's what our towers look like, and here's what we paid for it. This is what we need to pass along to our policyholders. And so, that is a big portion of, the cost to carriers here in Florida, and ultimately the cost to policyholders, directly related and tied to losses that have been sustained in the past and litigation that was happening here in Florida. So the good news is that at least this last reinsurance renewal cycle, at least the June 1 renewal cycle, which is where most of the domestic insurers, sign their treaties that time frame, pricing was relatively flat. There were some increases depending on your book of business, depending on, your loss experience, all that sort of stuff. But it was relatively flat, up a little bit. But that is compared to massive increases that were being taken over the previous years.
Year after year.
Right. So that leads to, some stability. Leads to pricing stability on the carrier side, because they're looking at claims data, they're looking at reinsurance costs, and passing that along to policyholders. So the reinsurance market, of course, there's a lot of chatter right now about what is 6/1 going to look like in 2025, and it's a little early right now. I haven't gotten enough reports from the 1/1 renewal cycle to feel real comfortable opining as to what that looked like ahead of 1/1 and towards the end of 2024. I sat in on a couple of different webinars from large reinsurance brokers that were sort of prognosticating what 2025 renewals would look like, especially with a backdrop of the storms that hit Florida this year.
Right.
And not everybody agrees with this, but I would say it's the overriding sentiment that I heard was that, despite the volatility in this year's hurricane season and, the impacts that Florida felt along with other states like Georgia and North Carolina and Tennessee as a result of Hurricane Helene, None of those storms were really outside of what the reinsurance market felt comfortable supporting.
Right.
They fall within the bounds of what would be an expected loss year. As everybody knows, this year was predicted to be, a year that, was much sort of more active than an average storm year. And the outcome was very close to what the predictions were. I mean, was it within reason of what the predictions were? But even though that it was predicted to be a much more active storm year, the actual losses sustained were within the bounds of what reinsurers, felt like their losses would be, leading many to say they don't expect a lot of changes going into the 2025 reinsurance cycle. So both at 1/1, which is when many of the national and commercial carriers do their reinsurance, and then 6/1 for domestic homeowners here in Florida. Now, what otherwise could have been, a rate decrease year on reinsurance had we not had as active a storm season, probably turns into relatively flat pricing again. Again, for the best performers, they may see plenty of capacity. They may see pricing coming down a little bit, but on aggregate, most people that I have talked to and most reports that I've seen and heard point to probably flat reinsurance pricing again, which again is much more stable than where we had been. Certainly in the last 4 to 5 years.
And as we talk to agents, and that's what they're looking for, right, Kyle? Yeah. They're looking for stability. They're looking for a marketplace where they can sell a product, stand behind that product, and know at the time of claims it's going to be there.
Right.
And so I think what you're saying there is reinsurance starts that process. Yeah. Having some stability there, which could lead to more capacity, better rate, and certainly maybe the form being added, some additional coverages to the form.
Yeah, I mean that's the hope, right?
Right.
That's the hope. I mean, that's the one thing that a lot of people don't talk about that we try to talk about a lot. Certainly when we're talking to members of the legislature and regulators, is that there's such a heavy emphasis on premium. And I understand why.
Got it.
I mean, we do. I mean, we understand why. I mean, that's sort of the easiest thing to talk about by a member of the legislature who doesn't really understand and appreciate, the insurance market. But we always point out that as impactful as rates are, as premium is to the policyholder, what is equally as important to consider is the coverage that policyholders have lost. And so, it means very little when to say that, pricing, you haven't gotten an increase, but now you don't have anywhere close to the coverage that you had before.
Exactly.
And so I think your last point is an important one. I know that there is a hope amongst many of our members that, for all of the reasons that we understand, carriers needing to go through exposure management and take away things from the policy, there's great hope that over time, agents will have more options and better options for their policyholders to be able to get some of that coverage back. Because I've talked to more agents than I can count that really lament the fact that, or lament sort of the product that they are having to sell.
Swiss cheese.
Yeah.
Right. And, FAI has been fortunate, Kyle, as you know, to talk to some of these new entrants and talk to people that are looking to deploy capital to Florida. And one of the conversations we've always have is about putting some coverage back in the form, adding some additional things. So agents, they can sell that.
Yeah.
They can, price being what it is, but certainly if there's some additional coverage benefits there, they can certainly match up with anybody to sell those.
Yeah, I mean, just give them a chance to try to sell it.
Exactly.
Obviously, homeowners, policyholders, consumers are price sensitive. There's a lot going on in our world that makes people price sensitive. Insurance is just one component of that.
Right.
On the other hand, agents really haven't had many options to be able to show their policyholders, to be able to make a case for, Dave, you really need this coverage. And, I can now offer that to you. Yes, it's going to cost you 200, 500, 600, whatever that number is, more. But you've seen what's happened over the last couple of years. You've seen the propensity for storms to happen. You are in a much better position to spend that $500 additional in premium to have the coverage that you need. And not all policyholders are going to buy it.
No.
But at least for agents to be able to make that offer, and not to mention the exposure that can be mitigated by being able to make those offers, that when the claim comes and the policyholder doesn't have the coverage, that the agent can say, I gave you that option and you chose not to take it.
Exactly. Exactly.
But yeah, those are conversations that we're having with new entrants. It's conversations that we're having with legacy and existing carriers too.
Right.
But new entrants is something that we had all hoped would be an outcome. We lost a lot of carriers to insolvency over the last couple of years, and there needed to be a backfill of those carriers. There needed to be new entrants that came to the marketplace to provide capacity to policyholders and agents here in Florida. And thus far, personal opinion, there hasn't been as many as I had hoped that there would be. 9 new carriers it seems like a lot, but as I point out in my blog and as agents know all too well, many of those carriers that have been approved are nothing more than a new carrier that an existing carrier has put up, maybe in a reciprocal model now, and they're transitioning much of their book, if not all of their book, to a new carrier. So yes, there's been a new certificate of authority issued. It's a new carrier on paper, but does it really move the needle for agents or for policyholders? In most cases, no, it does not. And so, again, I have to be very, very careful there. I don't want anybody to take that as me being critical. It's just the facts.
Right.
And it's the reality of the situation. So let's not, let's be proud of what has been accomplished. Let's point out the progress that has been made. The outcome is new carriers that are coming to the market, but it hasn't made a huge difference. I mean, in fact, one of the carriers who I won't mention, but one of the carriers that has gotten a certificate of authority, they haven't written one policy yet. I mean, they're still building out the company. They got their funding and they got their certificate of authority, having filed their plan with the office, but haven't written a single policy, haven't participated in citizens depopulation yet. So yes, it's a new carrier in Florida. You can look them up. You'll see them on the Office of Insurance Regulation website, but they don't have a policy on the books. So again, there's a lot of positives to what's going on, but it's still going to take time for all of that to sort of work through the system, and probably months, if not years, before there's that many more carriers writing a significant amount of business in Florida. I will also say that there are a handful of other, what I'll call investment groups that are out in the market that are trying to finish their capital raise in order to be able to get their certificate of authority. And as it has been for the last 2 years, those groups are at various stages of either their capital raise or regulatory, sort of approvals with the office. But I think it's safe to say that there will probably be another 2 or 3 that get their certificate in the first 2 quarters.
You just answered Patrick Lacey's question.
Okay. I think it's safe to say that there's at least 2 or 3 that we are aware of that will get their certificate of authority in the first 2 quarters of this year. And I know at least 2 of them have plans to start writing business immediately, whether that's strictly on a voluntary basis or whether that's voluntary and participating in citizens depopulation.
And that's through independent agents, right,
Yes,
Kyle?
absolutely.
Because
Yes.
I know there are some that have looked at this marketplace and have tried to use the direct channel, have tried to kind of have a little different model than we're used to, but certainly the ones we're speaking to are going to distribute the product through independent agents.
Yes.
And certainly have conversations with FAI.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of the carriers that have already gotten their certificate, we're in active conversations with regarding, access through IMS, Independent Market Solutions, to be able to give, some of our members who may not have a direct relationship with any of the leadership of the company and wouldn't get a direct appointment, being able to provide that through IMS, through a sub-producer appointment. And then several other investor groups that we've had extensive conversations with about their process and when they'll be up and running. I feel comfortable saying that they will be on IMS.
Okay.
And so, for those of you who have benefited from getting access to markets through IMS, it's been tough the last couple of years. Many carriers have not been offering sub-producer appointments. Many carriers aren't writing new business. That's starting to change. And as you pointed out earlier, some of those carriers are now opening back up. And we're going to have a couple of new markets on IMS to be able to provide to our members. So, we're excited about that.
And just a reminder, if you go on the FMS site and you go under our property market, you will follow that very closely, because some of those carriers that are already on that platform are opening up zip codes. They are opening up territories. They are appointing sub-producers. So it's fluid. So we remind people every day, go pretty regularly, or have somebody on your team, maybe once a week, go and just check through that list to see what's changed, because your zip code or your territory may now be open.
Yeah.
And you could get a sub-producer appointment.
Yeah. As everybody on this call knows, I mean, that is a very fluid situation, and underwriting guidelines, zip codes, and so forth are changing almost on a weekly basis. And we update that information for our property markets in real time. As soon as we get the notice from carriers that they've, appetite has changed, then we're updating that, and folks should be paying attention to it.
As we talk about depopulation, Kyle, and certainly that is a topic around here that we talk pretty routinely about. And I know there's some things going on with our legislative team and some other conversations, so we won't go into that. But rest assured, and certainly for this conversation, we hear you loud and clear. We understand sometimes this depopulation is clunky. We understand there may be some nuances that are frustrating. There may be some things that are happening that because of a policy that got tagged, and then of course the premium doesn't quite get where it should have been with the 20% rule and all that stuff. So I just want everybody to know, and certainly Kyle can opine as well, that we hear you loud and clear. We're continuously working with citizens and stakeholders to make that process better. And certainly, hopefully, down the road, some of those things will fix themselves.
Hopefully. Hopefully. I mean, it's one of these moments where you have to kind of step back and say, the broader public policy, initiative and goal is right. I mean, we should be doing everything that we can to get business out of Citizens and back into the voluntary market. But at what cost? And when I say at what cost, I'm not talking about the premium. I'm talking about the policy holder, and most importantly for FAI, the relationship between the agent and their policy holder, and the ownership of that expiration, the ownership of that business, and the relationship that we will protect at all costs. And there have been, proposals all along the way that would infringe upon, what we believe to be, the most important piece of Florida law, which is consumer choice and the agent's right to that policyholder and ownership of that, business. But the policies need to come out of Citizens.
Right.
And I think for a lot of agents who, let's be honest, I mean, there wasn't really any meaningful depopulation that happened at Citizens for 3 years.
Oh, at least.
I mean,
at least meaningful.
Yeah,
right.
meaningful.
Absolutely.
I mean, there are carriers that participated,
but
And I'm not discounting
right, but their
participation.
percentage of takeout was
yeah. I mean, you're talking about tens of thousands of policies annually
versus
compared to this past year. I think their last board report that Citizens provided, I mean, there was going to be 428,000-ish policyholders that were, moved out of Citizens into the voluntary market, with many more policyholders having received offers.
Correct.
But, that 428, if I'm getting that number right, it's somewhere around there. That 428,000 got Citizens policy count at year end below 1 million for the first time in a long time. I think 2021 or 2020 was the last time that Citizens was below 1 million policyholders. So there are a lot of agents that obviously were frustrated with that process. When it first started, there were carriers who were making offers to policyholders that could have been 100% of Citizens premium. We talked earlier about our members' unbelievable ability to sell. I don't care how good a salesperson you are. It's pretty difficult to sell 100% rate increase. And, rightfully so, agents were frustrated. Like, why? There's a 20% rule here. Why are you even sending us this offer?
Right.
Knowing that the policyholder is not going to take it, we can't sell it, and it's just eating up time. And so, that has evolved, that has changed. That's not happening to the best of my knowledge. That's not happening anymore. And so, yes, there was frustration there. I think part of it too was a lot of agents were out of practice. A lot of agents hadn't dealt with the depopulation efforts in a long time. And when you haven't dealt with those things for years, when it's now reinstituted or starts back up again, there's a learning curve associated with that. You got to change workflows. You got to change process in the agency. You got to have people who, are on top of these things and communicating with policyholders in the way that you have to make sure that they have the information that they need to make an informed decision. So yeah, it was hard. It was hard for a lot of agents. I hope that many agents are sort of settling back into that routine, understand it a little bit better. I would say, if you have issues, don't hesitate to reach out to us. I mean, we field those calls every day. We have an incredibly, meaningful and beneficial relationship with Citizens. They are responsive. It doesn't mean we always get the answer that we want, or get the agent the answer that they want, but we can get the answer. And so if you do have issues surrounding depopulation, or frankly anything else for that matter, don't hesitate to reach out. We can make those calls. We can find out what the situation is and try to rectify it to the best of our ability. But that's going to continue. I mean, there's already depopulation takeouts on the books or scheduled for the coming months here in 2025,
February and March. Yep.
And that's still, I think those months account for over 100,000 policyholders, policies, if not more. So the trend is going to continue. Citizens' estimates are a little more conservative on how many policies will be depopulated this year compared to 2024. But that's probably fair. I think their estimates were somewhere in the 200,000 policy range. Citizens projects that 296,000 policies will be removed in 2025. So that's down from what it was in 2024. But that's a byproduct of a number of things. One, some uncertainty as to what carriers will be participating, whether there'll be any new ones participating.
Right.
And let's be honest, the fact is that the lower the policy count gets in Citizens, the less really attractive business there is. And we already saw that oftentimes we would see these reports that X number of policies were tagged for takeout. Well, that's true, but there was some duplication.
No doubt about it.
In the numbers. You may have had 2, 3, 4, 5 carriers all tagging the same
Yeah, we
policy.
heard as many as 7 at some point.
Yeah.
So because those are attractive policies.
They're attractive policies. And so as the policy count goes down in Citizens, the number of really attractive policies that carriers are interested in is obviously going to go down as well. And so I understand why. Yeah. I mean, it's logical that the estimates would be a little lower than what they were in 2024. But the hope is that, with each quarter that goes by, there are better and better financial results being reported, and there is more and more confidence. It's one thing to talk about the depopulation. It's another thing that, there are policies that simply won't renew with Citizens because an agent has a market to be able to write the business. Yep. I mean, agents, and this is the, thing that we end up beating our head against the wall on repeatedly is, telling the legislature that our members have every incentive in the world to write that business in the voluntary market as opposed to Citizens. Citizens is not the easy button, nor it's not meant to be the easy button. But so, yes, there may be 300,000 policies depopulated from Citizens. That's a very efficient way for carriers to get a lot of business all at one time. But for agents, as carrier appetite changes and carriers say, yes, we're back open and you're in this zip code, agents will have more options. They will have the ability to not or make sure that those policies don't renew in Citizens and just simply write them in the voluntary market. So they'll leave Citizens, just not through a formal depopulation process. So, so if we go back, and look at 2025 at the end of this year and look at the depopulation number, and let's just say it's what Citizens said it was going to be, 300,000. There's a high likelihood that their policy count actually goes down by more than 300,000 because of agents' ability to write business in the
because the market has rebounded, right? That's and there's new entrants and there's new capacity.
We say it all the time. I mean, Citizens policy count is a byproduct of the health of the market. It doesn't drive. Citizens doesn't drive the market. The market drives Citizens policy count. And so to the extent that the market continues to heal, results continue to get better, and there is more confidence from carriers that they can write business profitably here in Florida, the policy count at Citizens is going to naturally go down.
And before we transition, just want to close the loop on this. There's questions that come to us, why depop versus the voluntary, right? Why does a carrier decide to go to that depop route instead of opening up to an independent agent to write that voluntary business? And that's part of a business plan.
Money.
That's part of
money.
So let's call it what it is, right, Kyle?
Yeah.
It's money.
It's money. Yeah, it's absolutely. And I don't say that, to, sort of make it sound nefarious or bad or anything.
Right.
But, if a company through a depopulation plan can put on 20,000 policies, assume 20,000 policies, through that process on a single date, that's a more efficient way of putting premium on the books than writing those 20,000 policies on a one-off basis. Organically. It is. But it again, that's a product of what Citizens policy count is. It won't always be that way.
Right.
I mean, it's a way to get a lot of policies out of Citizens in an expeditious way. It's a way for carriers to put a lot of premium on the books in a very efficient way. Now, the downside for carriers is that they don't always know exactly what it is that they're getting because there's only so much information that Citizens has in the underwriting file. And despite their best efforts to try to get as much information as they possibly can that carriers would also in turn want, they don't have everything. And so, I'll use my own personal example. I'm a Citizens policyholder.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And we, on multiple occasions this past year, were tagged for depopulation. As soon as I got that notice, I'm like, okay, good. We're leaving Citizens. We're going to go to a voluntary market carrier. Get a call from my agent to say, hey, I'm going to call the company and let them know that you don't actually qualify. Your home is on peers and that doesn't qualify under underwriting guidelines. So we're going to have you removed from that because all that would happen is that you would be taken out. They would later find out that you don't qualify under their underwriting guidelines and you're going to be non-renewed and you're going to go back to Citizens.
Yep.
So let's cut this off at the beginning. So, you don't have to go through that.
Exactly.
Citizens doesn't have to go through it. The carrier doesn't have to go through it. So, there are those types of examples. People still get frustrated. I wouldn't say that's anyone's fault. It's just the fact that citizens can't have all of the information. So it's a downside to carriers. Like, while the upside is that, yes, they're able to put a lot of premium on the books and a lot of policies on the books in a very quick, efficient process. Some carriers would argue that it's not that efficient, but it's more efficient than writing 20,000 policies organically. They do end up with business that otherwise would not qualify under their underwriting guidelines, and chances are that business may end up flowing back to citizens.
And keep in mind, as we talk through, and certainly our legislative team, those are some of the things that we're having discussions around. Is how to transition those policies back.
Yeah, I mean, so a perfect example, like this idea of comparable coverage.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that is a big topic.
Yep.
That we have had more conversations than I can count with both citizens and the OIR on comparable coverage, most specifically water coverage.
Right.
When we helped draft that comparable coverage definition back in the early 2000 teens, I guess, the thought never even occurred to us that one of the things in the comparable coverage definition would need to be water.
Right.
What carrier is going to take away water coverage?
Yep.
I mean, well, roll the tape 10 years later, and hindsight's always 20/20. You go, gosh, how did we?
And here we are.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of that has been addressed. I think agents should be seeing the outcome of that in the most recent consent orders coming from the OIR.
Yep.
They're paying a lot closer attention to it. It took us, going to them and pointing this out, saying, hey, this is a big issue for policyholders and agents. That I know the statute doesn't specifically address water coverage, but it's the single most important coverage that you should be comparing. And so I'm hopeful. We've heard some positive outcomes from that. It's a constant battle, though. I mean, it's something that will always be evolving, and we will continue to have those conversations.
So, as Kyle already mentioned, if there are some issues that you're seeing in that process, that you're seeing that you feel like is really prohibiting you of being a good, strong, independent agent for your client, let us know. Let us bring it to our attention. Certainly, we have a process here through the legislative team and all that stuff. But if we don't hear about it, it's a little difficult to try to address it. So if it's out there, please let us know. So,
absolutely.
Kyle, as we transition our conversation this morning, and for those that don't know, normally we're in a studio. Today we're in a different studio, and we're sitting in chairs that normally you see in your grandparents' house that you can never sit on. They're in the living room, and they're always off limits to the kids, right? But Kyle and I are sitting here, and and as we look at the future of FAI, Kyle, we have our plan of work, we do our summer leadership, we have capital days, we have other meetings, and then this year we participated in a 3-year strategic plan, right? And we talked about what this organization will look like in the next few years, what that runway looks like. As you think about that, what do our members need to know about FAI and where we sit and what the future holds for us?
I think the first thing that our members should know about FAI, and I talk about this almost every year at summer leadership, it is this term that I've used. It's called alignment, and it is the alignment between our volunteer leadership, our board of directors, our finance committee, our FMS board of directors, the entirety of our governance structure, including our legislative council and other task forces and committees, that the expectations and the goals are clearly articulated to us coming from our members. Like, our members drive that process.
Right.
And then in turn, a plan of work is promulgated on an annual basis that is the roadmap for you and I and the rest of our team. Like, this is how we are judged. These are the things that you should be focusing on and working on. And they are very measurable. That's, I think, also very important when you're laying out goals for any organization. It's very important that you're laying out goals that are measurable. And there are certain things that are a little harder to measure than others. I will acknowledge that. But most importantly for our members, I think that you need to understand and know that our annual plan of work and a 3-year strategic plan that we just did in October with our board and other volunteer leaders is member driven. It is not you and I, sitting in my office or your office behind a closed door saying, hey, what do you want to do this year?
Right.
It's not it. We are getting feedback from members throughout the year. That feedback is being given to our volunteer leaders. It's workshopped in committees and councils and all that sort of stuff. And ultimately, the board of directors approves that. So I think the single most important sort of piece of the puzzle for FAIA's success, both in the past and in the future, is that alignment. Is that we are doing what our members tell us we need to be doing, and we are held accountable for it. And as probably everybody on this call knows, the process of strategic planning can be a little arduous. It can feel like you're just kind of checking the box, like, well, people say I should do strategic planning, and so we're going to do strategic planning. And but I have found in this role that there are very few things that are more important than that. Taking the time to sit down and have an honest evaluation of your business, your enterprise, for in our case, trade association, with your leadership to say, here's what we do well. Here are some things that we simply shouldn't do anymore. I mean, It's that. At its core, it's that start with a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. What should we stop doing immediately? What should we focus on? And so our meeting that was facilitated by an outside facilitator in October was fantastic. It was great. Now, did we walk away from that meeting, having things in our strategic plan that were completely out of left field that none of us anticipated? No. Because our governance structure is such that we get feedback and we have involvement among our members in a very consistent way. But it was good to hear from our board that what we were hearing and what we were thinking is sort of the right direction, and then you put it into a plan. And I think what members will start to see. We will continue to do many of the things that we have always done. I mean, there will continue to be a heavy emphasis on professional development, CE, and training. You're going to start to see some new things in that curriculum, in the course catalog, but it's a constant evolution. What is it that our members, we know you need training, we know you need CE, what are some new ways that we can, deliver that to our members in a way that's meaningful for them, in a way that you want to consume it? So that will always be a focus, will continue to be a focus. A couple years ago, actually out of our last strategic plan was the initiative to provide our members with free education and the course catalog, 10 hours for every licensed employee of an agency. And, we have seen that grow. We decided to stop measuring the success of education based on financial performance, but instead the number of students that we teach on an annual basis. And it still boggles my mind when we hear from members that, oh, I didn't know that we had that. I didn't know that we had, the opportunity to get 10 hours of free education, along with the e-summit that we do annually that delivers thousands of hours of continuing education in a 3-day event. but that will continue to be a focus. Obviously, legislative and regulatory advocacy will continue to be a fundamental tenet of what we do. But I think what members will start to see, from us in the next couple of years that you may not have seen from us in the past is a heavier emphasis on technology and being a technology resource for our members. That conversation, not just for agencies, but for the association too, is a daunting conversation. I mean, the number of sort of technology vendors and platforms and options that are out there is an overwhelming thing for both our members and for the association. And so, our board, and I completely agree, believes that FAI should be a leader there. I mean, we should be a better resource for our members when it comes to technology needs, analyzing, where an agency is in their sort of evolution of their agency with the usage of technology, and finding technology solutions that are in fact additive to the agency, that create efficiencies. And so we're going to go down that road. And as part of that, artificial intelligence is obviously a big part of that. You can't, open, any set of clips these days, without seeing some article somewhere about, AI.
Yep.
And we are, beginning to implement some of those things here at the association, albeit in a very sort of slow, very thoughtful, measured way. But I think we have no choice. And because it can create incredible efficiency within and we're not looking to replace employees, but we're looking to figure out ways for our employees to work more efficiently and be able to spend more time on what I will call the customer service side of the house, as opposed to the administrative or mundane things that eat up people's day. And that's no different than an agency. There are things that can be automated in agencies that some agencies are doing incredibly well. Others are getting there, and some have said, I don't understand any of this and therefore I'm not doing it.
Yep.
So let us be a resource for you. And so in that vein, in the coming months, we'll be rolling out in a very sort of strategic way an enhanced partnership with Catalyst that you can see there on the screen. For years, we have been a partner with Catalyst that has provided our members basic access to their services. It's really just given our members access to informational resources, blog posts, webinars, those types of things. But with a significant financial commitment on behalf of our members through the association, in the coming months, all of our members are going to have full access to Catalyst, which includes, text selectors and, an assessment that you can go through and figure out sort of where your agency is in the technology life cycle, and start to provide, if you want to go the route of full consultative services where somebody can come into your agency, you can do that too. But we're excited about the partnership with Catalyst. In fact, I think we had a call yesterday or the day before with the Catalyst leadership to start to roadmap the rollout. And there have been several other states, there's probably close to a dozen now, that have moved to this all-in model where the association is paying for full access for their members. And again, it's not going to come in as any additional charge to our members. The association, thankfully, is in very sound financial condition. We had a very good financial year, and we're constantly looking for ways to use those resources for the benefit of our members. And this Catalyst partnership is just another example of using the resources that the association has built over time for the benefit of our members. And so I think that for those, well, I know for those states that have gone to that all-in model, the engagement amongst members and the usage of Catalyst has, increased in a significant way. And I think many of our members who otherwise really wouldn't be able to afford to go pay a consultant to tell them what they need, if the consultant really even knew what they were talking about, this will give our members access to that free of charge.
And I think, I was fortunate to be part of that conversation at the strategic plan. And as we heard agents in the room talking about this, they wanted to make sure it was for any member of the association.
Absolutely.
Because there are certain members that certainly have the wherewithal and the means. And then there's some that are smaller of nature and in a locale that maybe they don't get the consultant coming to their office anytime soon.
That's right.
So,
exactly right.
Yeah. So more to come on that, folks, and certainly between blogs and other things, you'll see a lot more information about Catalyst. So, Kyle, we can't not have one of these kickoffs. We may go a few minutes over, but we are recording it. So if you have to jump off, you can come back and listen to this part. But March 3rd through the 5th, Capital Days, Young Agent Political Summit. That has been a tenet around here for many, many years. And it's important. And it's a way for agents to gather in Tallahassee, listen to the association talk about the issues, and then go to the Hill and talk to your local legislators about things that are important to you and your customers.
Yeah.
So, if you want to say a few more words about that, but just encourage you, if you've not been, certainly it's nice to be a first timer. If you've been before, I'd love to have you back.
It's one of the most important meetings and events that we have at the association. It can't be overstated how important legislative and regulatory advocacy is. It's something we pride ourselves in. I think we do it very well. But one of the reasons why we are as successful as we are is because of our members. And, the fact that our members have relationships locally and, can come to Tallahassee and explain to a member of the legislature how public policy and decisions that the Florida legislature makes have a direct impact on their constituents and our members' customers, and explain that in a way that's understandable rather than, hearing it from a regulator who is, talking in, all sorts of acronyms and data points and all that sort of stuff. Come tell a story to your member of the legislature about, what has happened in the market over time. And hopefully many of our members will be able to, for the first time in a long time, give some positive sort of feedback and stories of how the market is improving. Because in order for us to protect the reforms that were passed in 22 and 23, legislators need to hear that there are positive things happening. Yes, they want to hear that rates are coming down, but there are all sorts of other things that you can talk about with members of the legislature about options and capacity and all of those sort of that are very, very meaningful. And, for 16 years, I did that at the association. I was your paid lobbyist. And as good as our paid lobbyists are with Laura at BG and our outside counsel, there's only so much they can say. They're the paid lobbyists for the association. That's what they're paid to say.
Exactly.
That's what they're paid to do.
Exactly.
For a member to volunteer their time and come to Tallahassee and share stories with members of the legislature, it is incredibly impactful.
Yeah. And again, I think, as Kyle mentioned, we can talk about the reforms that happened in 22 and 23, the results in 24, and talk about those with the legislators, because as many of you know on this call, they change. There's people that term out. There's people that run for other offices. And so, the dynamic of the bodies that are up here are different.
Yeah.
And so having a voice from FAI, having the members talk about those things is very, very meaningful, as Kyle mentioned. We did talk about the member benefit. I will say when Kyle and I were doing a pregame on this, I said, should we keep this slide in? And he said, absolutely. We want to remind members as often as we can about this member benefit. Folks, we can't stress it enough. It's on the education site. Go down. It says education member benefit. It puts the classes there and certainly the times and dates that they're available. We encourage you. For those of us that are licensed and need 20 hours every 2-year cycle, you can get 10 of those hours just by conducting these classes on an annual basis.
Yeah.
So because they do change. So Kyle mentioned the eSummit. That is another member benefit that we open up not only to agencies, but certainly our associate members can take part in this as well. And the dates, as you see on the screen, March 18th to the 20th. I will tell you, based on the conversations we've had internally about Catalyst, there's going to be some discussions and maybe a class or two talking about AI and some of the components there. Upcoming shows, Carl Rockman and Jeremy Pope with Citizens on the 24th. And then another FAI partner, Ask Fetch, with Chris Black and Trace Meek, certainly. And then I'm booking shows February and March now. So certainly encourage you to tune in on those as well and learn about what's happening with our relationships and different things with them. And then the big event, right? We have a convention, and it's every June, and we are very proud of it. And Cindy, our ringleader, has certainly spent a lot of time and effort getting registration open on January the 6th. Mm-hmm. So if you've not gone on the website to take a look at all what's offered in June, we certainly encourage you to do so. And we even encourage you even more so to book your room.
Yes.
Because that, again, these hotels are very popular. They have a lot of attendees that come from different places and different vendors and different exhibitors. And so we encourage you as a member of the association to get on there, not only to register for the convention, but book your hotels. And even if you have to cancel them later on, so be it. But it's better to have it and be able to cancel it than not have any room at the end. So
that's exactly.
And then thank you for attending today. A reminder, these are recorded. We have a place on the education tab that has Friday Morning Live, and these recorded sessions are updated as we record them. So we encourage you, if you missed an episode and you want to hear what Kyle had to say about the property market or Catalyst or some of the other topics, we encourage you to go back and listen to that or share it with a team member or maybe bring it up at one of your team meetings. We encourage you, but they're there. We certainly have a lot of them there. 2025 will kick off the list and add more to them. So we appreciate everybody's time. If you have questions, certainly reach out to us. I don't see any questions specific to your topics today, this morning. I think we answered Patrick's.
Okay.
But again, if you have a question or two, you know how to reach us. But we thank you. Happy New Year, 2025. Kyle, thank you for being our annual kickoff guest.
No, happy to do it.
New season. And folks, wish you well. Be safe out there. Glad we deal with hurricanes, but certainly the fires out in California are a little alarming. So
it's sad to see.
It is. It's sad of people just losing absolutely everything. But I know some on this call and some, and certainly locales have felt that way. It's just a different peril of coverage, right?
Yeah.
So,
I thank you for mentioning that, Dave. I would just point out that we did, put a piece in the Agent Confidential that went yesterday about the Trusted Choice Disaster Relief Fund. That is something that our members have greatly benefited from in recent years. And so to the extent that you felt a calling to give something to your fellow agents who are dealing with unbelievable loss out there in California, but I encourage you to check out the Trusted Choice Disaster Relief Fund.
Yeah. Thank you. And certainly if you have any questions on there, please let us know. We'll direct you to the right thing. But it is in the AC, and certainly you can have access to it there. But But thanks again, folks. We'll see you in a couple weeks with Carl Rockman and Jeremy Pope. And y'all have a great day.
Thanks, y'all.